will start to come out. There is the AP, the media poll, that eventually there'll be the coaches poll, among others as well. And there some of the online various websites, whoever have their top 25. It looks like Alabama's going to pretty much be not unanimous, but they're going to be a part of the number one across the board in many, many ways. We're now joined by Aaron Suttles, theathletic.com covers Bama. Aaron, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. I read a story earlier about Nick Saban saying something that last year's team was a rebuilding job.
Yeah, and I'm quite frankly surprised everyone is kind of taking over college football. I wrote that a couple weeks ago for The Athletic. It was a mailbag question. I don't see how it couldn't be a rebuilding year, considering everything they lost from the 2020 team. I mean, if you go back and look at how there were six first-round draft picks off that 2020 team they lost, they had to replace most of them on the offensive side of the ball, starting quarterback, left tackle, running back, Heisman-winning wide receiver, another first-round wide receiver. So, yeah, I think despite the fact that they won an SEC championship, despite the fact that they had a lead in the fourth quarter of the national championship, it was a rebuilding year.
Aaron, have they rebuilt the offensive line? The offensive line was, I mean, to say down year, there are a lot of fan bases that roll their eyes at it, but it was one of the things that Alabama fans, knew was kind of a weakness if they had one. Is the offensive line rebuilt? Are they better on that side of the ball now after a season?
I think it remains to be seen. I think it's the top storyline of preseason camp, which opens on Friday here at Alabama. They don't have a returning, but Evan Neal was the starting left tackle last year. He was really good, and he was the most consistent, offensive lineman they had. He's gone. So you're looking at a situation where you got two tackles. The right tackle was horrific by Alabama standards pretty much all year. And, you look at the spring game, and that first-team offensive line gave up 10 sacks to the first-team defense. Now, there were some guys out for the spring, but it's not a solidified unit. And I think it's whoever wins that, the tackle job, those two left and right tackle, that's where it's going to start. But it's going to be the most watched thing with Alabama this year. And I think we'll probably end up telling the tale of how good this Alabama team will be.
Aaron, what are the expectations or what's kind of the early buzz surrounding Jahmyr Gibbs?
He's going to be real good. I think he's going to be outstanding. I think he's going to be the guy to watch. Other than Bryce Young, he's the guy to watch when Alabama's off. Alabama's there's two Heisman Trophy winners at running back, so they've had their fair share of really good runners. And I think this guy fits right into that. I'm not saying he's a Derrick Henry or Mark Ingram. He's got his own style. I think particularly he will make his mark out of the backfield as a pass receiver too, as a pass option. I think when you start looking at all the different ways he's going to affect the game, the traditional run, plus with his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, he's elusive, he's quick, and he's got better than average speed. He had a 75-yard touchdown run in the spring game where he showed off that speed. I think he's going to be tremendous. I think he's probably right now one of the player that fans are really anxious to see to open the season, and you're starting to see his name pop up on Heisman odds. This is a guy that hadn't played one game for Alabama, was a transfer coming in from Georgia Tech. So despite never having played a real game for Alabama, the expectations are pretty high for him.
And being here in Texas, I remember Jace McClellan being at Aledo, and I remember his recruitment and all that. Where does he kind of fit in? I know they got Gibbs, they got Sanders, but where does McClellan fit into that? How do you sort of evaluate his positioning?
I think he would have been running back one this year had he not gotten hurt. He got hurt last year, and that certainly – and he was limited during the spring, didn't do anything. And then they brought in Gibbs. I still think he's going to get a ton of carries. I still think he's capable of, if Jahmyr Gibbs was not here, is capable of being RB1, running back one. And he will sort of be the guy that splits carries with Gibbs in my estimation. I think he's the next guy up. Or even, the way Alabama sort of views it, I think he's a co-starter. I think you're not going to get very much drop-off when you put him in the game. They're not the same skill set, but Jace is very good in his own right and has proven that in the glimpses we got of him in his first two seasons. But the injury, anxious to see how he comes back from that, because that certainly was a setback last year.
Aaron, I find it funny every year. It's not like funny, giggle, but, you have teams that jump out to these early rankings when it comes to commitments, and some of them eventually end in the top 15 or 20, 25, whatever. But I did kind of notice that Alabama was just kind of treading water. Then all of a sudden, poof, all these commits coming in, and there's more to come. And they'll probably even take a couple of others that are committed elsewhere. They seem to be, as expected, like they're supposed to be good in football, that their recruiting class is shaping up pretty damn well the last 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they were languishing by Alabama standards. I think they were close to 50, if not in the 50s, at some point in June. And the low point was when, a five-star player from in-state, Peter Wood, had been in Alabama lean his entire recruitment and ends up going to Clemson. And, he's got several teammates that either are committed to Alabama or are currently on Alabama's team. So losing him was probably the low point, and people started asking at that point, right? You got this new thing that coaches have to deal with, this new landscape of NIL, and it was starting to be put out there that Alabama, is this the thing that Nick Saban can't solve? Can he not solve NIL? Is he not relating to today's recruits as well? And then all of a sudden, they have caught fire, and they have gone from near 50, but they're now the number one ranked class in 2023 with a long way to go. And as you mentioned, they're probably going to flip a couple guys more. They just flipped their tight end from Ohio State. They just got a five-star running back from Florida. They got a five-star safety from Georgia. So this class is coming together very nicely, and it's just light years from where it was a month and a half ago, and that's how quickly they got it going. It's just, as you mentioned, we sort of always overreact or prisoner of the moment to what we see, and Nick Saban and that staff have turned it around really quick with a chance to be one of their better signing classes ever.
Aaron, are you on the Will Anderson Heisman candidate train?
Yeah, I had a Heisman vote last year, and I put him number one. I think it's a shame when you have people like Chris Russo, who's, as you guys know in your business, what he's done in his career, but that would come out and publicly say he doesn't even consider it a defensive award.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to really start looking at, and I've as a sports writer, I get to vote for several awards, and I've always questioned, do we deserve it? I mean, how seriously do we take awards when people can come out and make statements like that, and it's just, oh well, that's just the way it is. If that's the case, then just change the award and make it the best offensive player, and then create a defensive Heisman. I think he's the – listen, you guys know when you cover a team, you try to do it as objectively as possible in this business. And you admit when you try to be transparent with the readers if you have any biases or if you have any blind spots, to let them know this is where a potential bias might be in my coverage. So, yes, I admit I cover Will Anderson, and so I see him more frequently than other players across the country, right? But what I love in this business, and you guys probably experience a lot there with the quality of kids you have in Texas, is when a good player is a good person. Mm-hmm. And Will Anderson is as good a person as Nick Saban has had in that program. And when you throw that on top of the type of player he is, he's going to go down as one of Nick Saban's all-time best players. I think he's unbelievable. I was doing a story. I'll tell you a story real quick. I know you're running out of time.
You're good.
I wrote a story last year before the season. I worked on it, drove to Georgia, got with Will's parents, got with his high school coach. I sort of wrote that it was his 5 older sisters that sort of shaped the person and competitor he is. And Will was one of the last people I got to interview, and Alabama was still doing COVID protocol, so I had to do it over the phone. And he said, okay, I know you talked to my parents, you talked to my high school coach, my sisters. He goes, but before we do this interview, just please promise me one thing. I said, sure. He goes, don't make me better than I am. And I said, and it kind of took me by surprise, and it struck me later on. Guys, he didn't realize he was that good last year. Going into last year, which was a historic season, what turned out to be, he really didn't understand how good he was. He obviously does now when you do what he did as a sophomore, but I think he's got that mix of humility, so even the way he prepares is like an underdog mentality because his home state, Georgia, didn't want him as much as Alabama did. It sort of played into his work ethic, his character, and now he's transitioned to be, in my opinion, the best player in college football but he keeps that sort of mindset that he doesn't think he's that good, which makes him push himself. And now he's evolved into a fantastic leader. I just think, this is why we like college sports. Getting to cover a young man like Will Anderson, and now with NIL, he's starting to realize, how good he is by the opportunities he's been given business-wise. So he's a phenomenal football player and a phenomenal human being. His parents have done a wonderful job raising him.
Yeah, I just think it's silly you mentioned Chris Russo or anybody that says it's an offensive award, given that ask the offensive coordinators who have to plan for Will Anderson, or the ones who had to plan for Ndamukong Suh, or, Manti Te'o came in second, but who had to plan for them, and tell them he doesn't affect the game as much as a wide receiver, running back, or quarterback.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's and part of this I go back to, it's on sports writers and really any media or anybody who has a vote. It's what we can easily digest. And quarterbacks put up stats that are easily digestible. It's why anytime that there's a dual threat quarterback up for the Heisman, he wins it going away. Because, sports writers have a category in rushing and passing. We can't help ourselves. We go crazy. That's why we don't give off love to offensive linemen. There are no easily digestible stats that are available that tell you how good an offensive lineman is. But you can't tell me that an offensive lineman is not one of the most important players on the field. I mean, as you mentioned, look at Alabama last year. That's why Bryce won it, I think, is the fact, the last week of the regular season, he gets sacked 7 times at Auburn. They barely survived. And then the very next week, he goes out and carves up the historically good Georgia defense. So, the blocking that changed in one game, you can't tell me an offensive lineman, but there are no stats that we can look at and point to say they're the best. And, look at Jonathan Taylor at Georgia last year. He was one of the best players in the country, but his stats didn't jump off because he was a nose guard. He's not at a position that's going to get a ton of stats. Mm-hmm. His value in the all-22, seeing what he does to free up Nakobe Dean and all those other linebackers at Georgia. So, yeah, I wish there were a way that we could recognize the truly greats, as you mentioned, in Ndamukong Suh, and even Aiden Hutchinson at Michigan last year, phenomenal defensive player, and obviously Will Anderson fits into that as well.
Aaron, it's 1 month from today. Alabama will open up at home against Utah State, and then the week after, the big road trip to Austin to take on Texas. When I mention Alabama and Texas like it could be competitive, people around here just roll their eyes. Like they feel like Alabama's just going to be so much better. But is there a good buzz already kind of looking forward to that game and the Tide going on and taking Sark down in Austin?
I think so. As you mentioned, the coaching staff ties with Jeff Banks and Steve Sarkisian, and the offensive line coach, and then the personnel, Keelan Robinson, obviously Jai Hall and Jaleel Billingsley, and the fact that it's a cool road trip, right? Austin, the last time Alabama, you guys may not know this, the last time Alabama had a true road game out of conference was in 2011 against Penn State. So, Alabama normally does its huge out of conference game at a neutral site, whether it's in Dallas or, Orlando, Atlanta, wherever it is, and they play a pretty marquee Power 5 opponent out of conference there. But the last time they played a true out of conference road game was against Penn State. So Alabama fans don't get very many, or haven't had very many trips like this over the last decade. So there's certainly a buzz for that. And then I would say, I think Steve Sarkisian, it's yet to be written how good of a head coach he is. I think he's a phenomenal offensive coordinator. And what he did with Alabama's 2020 offense, which had a ton of weapons and he could do basically what he wanted, was pretty impressive. So I think he's anytime he's got a quarterback that can pull the trigger and he's got an offensive line that can block, he's dangerous. So Alabama's certainly respecting that matchup, but the buzz is building. I've never been to Austin before, guys, so I'm taking restaurant recommendations.
Oh, well, there's a billion of them.
Turn left or right or go straight.
Yeah.
A lot of nice little cubby holes.
You know what, Aaron? After this interview, I will text you a list of barbecue places to go instead of Franklin.
Or Tex-Mex or whatever.
Franklin's great, but you may not have time to wait in line.
Every city has what was good and popular 10, 12, 15 years ago, and it still might be, but there's a lot of newness in a lot of places, especially like in Austin and Waco, too.
You'll love the Southern Silicon Valley because that's kind of what it's – but yeah.
My wife came with me for the Cotton Bowl. We were out there for the college football semifinal. She came out. We took a day trip to Waco. So we've done Waco, and then I think she's going to come out with me early the week of the Texas game. We're going to go to San Antonio for a couple of days and then hit Austin. So we're making some little vacations around this.
Yeah, I think that that one thing that SEC fans are going to absolutely love is the Austin road trip because it's just a city that's blown up, and yeah, you might want a couple more days the next time you book that. So yeah, I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun, and there's tons and tons. It's definitely going to be a lot busier than Waco, I'll tell you that. All due respect to where we live here, yeah.
By the way, Aaron, I'm proud, like you are, to be a Heisman voter, and I had Anderson in my top 3. I did too, and it wasn't even close. My question was whether or not I was going to vote him 1 or 2.
Right, and listen. The way they do I wrote about this. At least I don't even think I should have one. I'm happy to have one, and I take it very seriously. I treat it with respect to the players who play the game. But I'm watching my game every Saturday, so I'm seeing Alabama and whoever they play. And if I'm lucky, if it's an early or a super late game, I'll get either a morning or afternoon game or a late night game. So I try to watch the highlights. But you just don't get as much in the highlights. You get whatever ESPN wants you to see and whoever they want to push. So, I respect people who take their vote seriously. And that's all because we owe it to the game. We owe it to the winners who've come before, and we owe it to the young men who are deserving of that. So, I'm glad that I didn't think Will was going to win it last year, but I was glad that a couple of defensive guys got in that conversation because it's so cliche and predictable to just give it to the best quarterback, even though that's really what it's become.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Appreciate it, Aaron. I hope you don't mind. I'll be bugging the hell out of you, annoying you quite a bit on occasion to get you to come on about Alabama because I'm sure we'll be talking about them quite a bit. Have a great week.
All right, guys. Take care.
Aaron Suttles. You notice he didn't say, okay, I'm okay with that.
He was like, yeah, sure, later. Yeah, I mean, for those who haven't been to Austin,